me your dreams.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another Genshin Impact video, and today I'm just going to be talking about the third buff that Yae Miko has received in Fontaine. By the way, if you happen to like the content, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. I'm trying to get 9k subs by the end of 2024. Alright, let's get started. So you're wondering, what was the first two buffs? The first buff was the new domain in Fontaine, the new artifact set, aka the golden trope, which is a pretty good buff for Yae Miko, especially if you're going to use Yae Miko off field most of the time. The 2-piece set basically increases your character's elemental skill damage, and if you have the 4-piece set, it increases it even further if that character is off-field. So a very good buff for off-field Yae Miko. It also buffs other off-field characters, but this ain't about them. This is about Yae Miko. The second buff that Yae Miko received is Furina. Furina buffs everybody, especially Yae Miko, but this video ain't about them. It's about Yae Miko. The third buff that Yae Miko has received is through the overload reaction through Chevreuse. Chevreuse being the new 4-star pyro character that supports overload. Through Chevreuse, I would say that overload has gotten a buff. Hell, I would even say that it's actually a little bit more viable now. Now, it's not as busted as like Nouvellette teams or Dendro comps, especially since in order to unlock the full potential of overload, you do need to get Chevreuse C6. But with Dendro, it's a very free-to-play friendly element. It doesn't really take too much to invest in Dendro at all. I don't want to pressure people into C6ing Chevreuse because you really don't need it, but if you really want to unlock that full damage potential, then that C6 is pretty much needed. She works just fine at C0, but if you want more damage, you kind of want the C6. But that's just kind of how most gacha games work anyways. You know, the more dupes of a character, the more stronger they are. How Chevreuse supports overload is basically whenever any character in your party does an overload reaction, that enemy's pyro and electro resistance will go down. So more damage for your pyro and electro characters. And Chevreuse's C6 basically, you know, whenever Chevreuse uses her elemental skill, and after the 12 seconds of healing, that active character's pyro and electro damage will be increased by 20%. So the C6 basically increases, you know, your pyro and electro characters even further. Yae Miko is probably one of the best electro applicators out there, probably has the most range as well. Once you have her 3 totems going, you basically going to be applying electro all over the goddamn place, thus having so many goddamn bombs on the screen when you're using an overloaded reaction. Yae Miko also scales off of elemental mastery, and overload can make use out of elemental mastery. Not to mention, you do have artifact sets that do help with elemental mastery, so you can basically build Yae Miko with full EM, 2-piece EM, 2-piece EM, or maybe 2-piece EM, 2-piece of the golden trope. Set up your totems, set up your pyro application to whoever it may be, whether it be Xianglng. I think dehya might be a slightly better option since dehya does have a little bit more range in her pyro application, kind of. Gooba isn't really that much good of a pyro applicator. I mean, it's okay, but sometimes Gooba can just, like, you know, miss and shit. I think Xiangling's burst is like one of her best way to apply pyro, in my opinion. I think Thoma can probably work. I mean, his pyro shield does apply pyro every often. Bennet can kind of work. The problem with Bennet is that I don't think he'll be as useful against mobs, since when you overload the enemies, they'll basically be flinging away from Bennett's circle. Nobody uses Bennet for his pyro application. You're basically using him for his burst, and since overload can cause enemies to drift away from his burst, you basically, you know, you'll basically be chasing down enemies, not even utilizing Bennett's burst. If we ever get a 5-star Xianglng, overload would definitely be much better. Just constant pyro application with overload and shit, you know, there'll be bombs all over the goddamn place. I think dehya could definitely benefit in an overload team since her elemental skills circle is very big. It has a lot more range, so you can apply pyro every now and then with Yae Miko's totems. dehya's elemental skill also helps with damage to interruption resistance, since if Yae Miko gets hit, she's basically like a sitting duck, or a sitting fox in this case. But I don't really think there's like a real wrong or right answer here. I really think it just depends on like your playstyle. You might like playing with Xianglng a little bit more, or maybe you just like to play with dehya's elemental skill a little bit more. Just pick, you know, whoever your preference is. Now as for Electro characters to run with Yae Miko Overload, you got the Raiden Shogun, who's one of the best Electro characters in the game. She is on raid up right now, so you can pick her up. However, I do think majority of the player base already has her at least. Her banner sales right now aren't really looking that good, but that's kind of expected since, you know, I think a lot of people at this point basically have her. Raiden does have constant Electro application, and she can also be a very good battery for Yae Miko. Yae Miko's burst does cost 90, so it is going to take a lot of energy to get to her burst, and the Raiden Shogun does help with that. Not to mention the Raiden Shogun can also boost your burst damage as well. You got Fischl, who is an OG. She's been in the game since day one. She can also help provide to be a battery for Yae Miko as well. Fischl also has a talent in which whenever your active character triggers an Electro-related elemental reaction, the enemy will basically be stricken by thunder based off of Fischl's attack. When Fischl's at C6, Oz will be on the field 2 seconds longer, and if you have a character that's active on the field, Oz will actually coordinate attack with them. So if you're active with Xianglng-rafikplz, you can cause an overload reaction here, and not to mention both Fischl and Xianglng-rafikplz both wear eye patches, so you basically have half of your team wearing eye patches, half of your team is basically missing an eye. Beidou can technically kind of work as well. Her burst can deal Electro off field, although I don't think Beidou will really do much until she's C6, because at C6 whenever Beidou uses her burst, the enemy's Electro resistance will go down. So pairing up with Xianglng-rafikplz's Electro resistance down, it's going to be very devastating to the enemies. So when it comes to other Electro characters paired with Yae Miko for Overload, she does have some pretty good options. Overall, Overload is pretty fucking fun. I wouldn't really recommend you build it unless you're already like clearing Abyss anyways, or maybe if you don't even care about Abyss, you might as well just build Overload for fun. So that's gonna be the end of this video. Let me know what you guys think. Are you having fun with Overload so far? Are you thinking about building Overload? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys later.
Bye bye now. Come again soon.